And we look like we're going. We've got 30 frames a second, less than 10% CPU, no dropped frames. So I'm going to assume it's okay. And no, I'm not on the cam because I'm not all that fresh today. It was a little longer of a day than I was anticipated because my pain doctor wanted to get x-rays of my shoulder because it hadn't been x-rayed since it happened. Well, like a year later in 2007 or something when they were doing some additional surgery on it. So like 16, 17 years, she was like, I want to see what it looks like. So she sent me for x-rays. So that took a couple hours longer than I had anticipated, but it wasn't too bad. But you know how something like that just kind of pushes out the rest of your day.
I bet.
Oh, how you been?
Yeah. Okay. Mr. No says, you're in your 50s. Of course you're not fresh.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I just woke up from a nap. Like I said,
Uh,
I mowed the lawn. I mowed the lawn earlier, so
yeah. Understandable. I think neither one of us are very lively right now. So
yeah.
maybe we'll lean on the chat a little more than normal.
Yep. There's a strong possibility of that.
She also wants me to consider getting a neural block in my spine. That sounds kind of radical to me.
Hmm.
She said it's not as big a deal like it sounds, but
Uh,
it's better than like getting on a new medication or a higher dose that you like stay on. This would just be, just one time. It wouldn't be like something that goes away in a few days.
yeah.
But it would kind of be localized to like my lower back and my hip, which means I still have the pain everywhere else. So we'll see what he says about the x-rays. But
Though according to the politicians, the reason why you're in pain is because you're clearly a drug addict.
yeah. Well,
Mm.
and it's like they're really discouraging doctors from going up on opioids because the thing is now a lot of their other stuff, they pushed back against the CDC guidelines and got them to go back on those a little bit and things like that. But now they're saying that what can happen when you take hydrocodone is you can end up with kidney and liver failure. Well, we know that can happen with acetaminophen, and they put acetaminophen in with the hydrocodone. And so when they're testing it, they're testing hydrocodone with acetaminophen. They won't let them test just the hydrocodone to see if hydrocodone itself is got. So if you went to, like, generally they start you off at 325, which is 5 milligrams of hydrocodone, 325 of acetaminophen, and they can bump you up to like 7.5 or 10 milligrams or whatever of hydrocodone, but keep the acetaminophen where it is. And if it's the acetaminophen that's doing it, that's not going to mean any greater risk of kidney or liver problems, but they won't let them study that. So like the official position is no, if you go up on that and the patient has, kidney failure or liver failure, that could be malpractice for you.
It's kind of like when they put antifreeze in the bootleg alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, there are good reasons to have acetaminophen in with it because it's a COX inhibitor, and having a COX inhibitor will make the hydrocodone more effective. So, I mean, there are reasons to do that, but if you increase the dosage of the hydrocodone without increasing the acetaminophen, will that make a difference or not? And they don't want them to study that.
Yeah. And I am getting so sick of the political ads.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, all the stuff I get in the mail.
Mm. Though I do like I've seen some funny jokes one time about Kamala Harris, and many people have actually put it out when you really look about it. Kamala Harris doesn't actually say what she's gonna do.
When she does, it's something bad like taxing unrealized capital gains.
Mm. Like literally, the whole point of her campaign is people are asking her, Miss Harris, what are you gonna do as president? What's gonna be your agendas and your missions? And her only statement is, well, I won't be Trump. Okay, what does that mean?
But that's what she circles back to when she doesn't have an answer. She's like, but if Trump is elected, he will.
Yeah,
And that's why you don't want Trump.
yeah. Yeah, and people say Trump was the one who was inexperienced and didn't have a plan.
Well, he really didn't. In 2016, basically his only campaign promise was build the wall.
Mm,
Now he's got a little more than that.
Still, and many people brought. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Yeah, a lot of people brought this up. They're like, well, Trump doesn't have a plan. He's inexperienced. Hillary actually knows what she's doing and she knows what the job as president entails. And a lot of people are like, yeah, and that's why I don't want to vote for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we don't like her.
Yeah. She knows what she can do as president, and that's a bad thing. Because I don't know who it was, but there was a guy that said the only thing that's preventing America from being a full-blown dictatorship right now is that our own politicians are stupid or ignorant of their own power. Yeah.
There's more to helping addicts that doesn't involve stopping them from using again. Yeah, because there's some sort of underlying problem driving the addiction. And that's the part you actually have to treat.
Yeah. Like, I mean, a perfectly good example is, some people who are addicted say, it's like, yeah, I know, but if I don't take my drugs, the voices won't bother me. It's like, well, that's the problem right there. The problem isn't drugs. That's your problem. You gotta get tested for schizophrenia or something.
Or like if I, don't take the drugs, I get the shakes. Well, maybe you've got early onset Parkinson's.
Yeah. Yeah.
People having guns is a big factor in what? I don't get how that seems like a pivot there. I didn't. You got to connect some dots for me there, Mr. No.
Maybe you misheard me on something.
Oh, government not being a dictator.
Hmm.
That's why they want to take them away.
Oh, yeah.
We need to go back to, I forget that Supreme Court case, but I did a quickie on it where it says, yeah, if the cops are trying to, arrest you for something that isn't the law or engaging in other unlawful behavior against you, yes, you can defend yourself from them.
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, but there's still kind of a de facto gun registry.
Hmm. And also, I still kind of laugh how like there were so many news articles like when Biden announced that he was going to drop out of the election run. Everyone was like, "Oh, he was so brave to do that." It's like, no, we knew he was going to do that.
Rufus, are you talking about that guy? I think his last name was Coffee, but he was acquitted on the same day as Kyle Rittenhouse for defending himself. And people were saying, "Oh, well, gee, if Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't black, he wouldn't have gotten away with it. They would have found him guilty." Well, they didn't find Coffee guilty. I forget his first name, Alexander.
Yeah.
Pretty sure his last name was Coffee, though.
And even if that was true, like even if it is true that blacks, like there is racism, that doesn't mean the solution is to get rid of the Second Amendment.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
the solution is not to convict white people instead. The solution is to make it more equitable.
yeah,
Recognize
yeah, that's
everyone's rights, not take away everyone's rights.
yeah, that's why I'm sorry. I tell this to I want to tell this to Antifa people. That's why I say you are not against the defund the police group. You really are not. You just want the regular police, but you want them to go after people you don't like.
Is anyone not
Mm.
suspicious that there was no primary when Biden stepped down? Yeah, just really weird that all of a sudden, hey, it's Kamala now, when she never got a single vote from anyone.
Oh yeah.
You know there was some backroom dealings going on,
Oh
most
yeah, and
likely
now
involving Obama
and now it's racist to say she's a DEI hire when literally, if I recall correctly, Biden flat out said yeah, she was my she was my I chose her because she was a woman, even though from what I understand she wasn't popular even within the Democratic Party.
oh no.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that one guy, I think his name's Josh Shapiro. He's not related to Ben Shapiro. It's a different guy. Apparently,
Yeah.
a lot of Democrats, they wanted him to be the vice president because, according to people who have seen like his views, like he actually is a smart guy and he knows what he's doing. And apparently, you want to know why he was dropped out. According to some people that actually work for the Democratic Party, it was simply because he was Jewish.
Wow.
Yeah, because
But he was he
the,
was a little more moderate as well.
yeah. But yeah, they say that it was partially because he was Jewish because, with the whole situation in Gaza going on, they're like, "Oh yeah, Jew, yeah, with the whole issue, we don't want a Jew in there because that's going to piss off, the pro-Palestinian group and we don't want to lose those people's votes." Mm. Yeah, but Waltz isn't, he's not as, he's not as well known about it.
He just reminds me of one of those rock stars that they would coke up just before they came out on the stage.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting, because you notice that after the convention, Kamala started dropping down in the polls. If you saw Joe Biden's speech, yeah, it was full of the same lies that make your blood boil, all the exact same stuff. Oh, Trump said very fine people, Trump said bloodbath, etc., etc. But if you're talking about just how he delivered the speech, he was on it. And he was kind of the orator he used to be. And you got to think there have to be Democrats looking at that going, wait a minute, we gave up him for her?
Yeah.
She can't even talk 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And how close to zero are the chances of her sitting down with Elon for a conversation?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff they said that I disagreed with, but the Trump conversation with Elon Musk, I just liked the fact that they did it. It wasn't like this formalized thing we're going to do question and answer and have equal time and all that. Let's just talk.
Yeah.
And I would say he should do that with RFK Jr., although it looks like he's probably dropping out of the race.
Yeah.
To support Trump, and Democrats are like, how could you do that? How could you turn against us? It's like, you have spent the whole year engaging in lawfare, trying to illegally keep him off of every state ballot that you can, and you wonder why he turned against you. Work it out, people. Oh, yeah, she's a terrible speaker. I posted on the Discord an interview she did like 2 years ago with this guy on Comedy Central. And, oh my God, she just looks terrible. Yeah, well, Joe Biden has the spells where he kind of doesn't know where he is. But when Joe is on, he is on. So, I mean, you have Kamala basically running from her basement, even though she doesn't have the excuse of COVID that Joe did.
Yeah.
Well, that was like, at least with the betting odds, there was a while there for like a week or two when she was doing a lot better than Trump and everyone was generating the excitement. And like I said, right after the DNC, just way down. California AG 2010 race, you won by about 1%. Yeah.
Speaking of the DNC, did you see Planned Parenthood had a mobile clinic outside?
Yeah, for abortions and vasectomies. That's weird.
Yeah.
That's just weird. Who goes to a political convention and says, "Oh, I think I'll have an abortion"?
Yeah, honestly, it's funny because Planned Parenthood tries to say, oh, we're apolitical and we're not trying to insult anyone. We're just trying to provide, proper sex education and all that offers for women and all that. It's like, then why the fuck are you having an abortion and vasectomy clinic outside the DNC?
And why vasectomies?
Yeah.
Sterilize all the males you can? Is that the message?
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say, I don't know if you've heard this before, but one thing you can really do to trigger Planned Parenthood people is bring up the fact that their founder was a eugenicist and a white supremacist.
They don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, don't get us wrong, I mean, it is good that, we have contraceptives and birth control, but let's be honest here. Contraceptives were not developed for the purpose of liberating women. They were invented for another purpose.
There was still a lot of that under Kamala as AG in California. I think I covered this on the podcast when California was sterilizing black women in prison without their knowledge. They'd say, "Oh, well, we got to get you in here for surgery," or they'd come in because they were pregnant, they were giving birth to a child, and they'd tie their tubes and just not tell them.
Yep. I mean, do they still require chemical castration for sex offenders nowadays?
I don't know.
Yeah. Even though, if I recall correctly, they literally did studies and they found out that chemically castrating a guy doesn't. Not only does it not work, in some areas it might make them even more violent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might make them not get an erection, but they can be violent in other ways.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when it was. I'd have to check the podcast archive. Go to podcast.bagosity.tv and do a search, and you might find it, where California was sterilizing black women in prison. Why is most of the anti-SJW community pro-choice, or at the very least not opposed to abortion? I haven't really noticed that.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, I mean, another funny thing I saw with that whole, with that mobile abortion clinic at the DNC rally, I like how one person jokingly said, "Why are they doing this? Don't they realize they're killing future Democratic Party electors?"
Yeah. Some people were like saying, "Okay, yeah, let them do it. That'll be fewer voters for them."
Yeah. If you're voting for Kamala Harris, yeah, you deserve to not reproduce.
Darwin in action.
Yep.
I mean, talking about the anti-SJW, because the SJWs are like the extreme, and most Democrats are moderate and don't really agree with that. So that might be what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're more moderate, they'll.
Yeah. And besides, the Democratic Party only became pro-choice and all that only when it became the political thing to do. Because before, when it was unpopular, even amongst liberals, what did you say? What did all the Democratic politicians say? Oh, I don't like abortion.
Yeah, it wasn't even until after Roe v. Wade that
Yeah.
the Democratic Party started coming around on that. Because even
Yeah.
in like New York, oh God, I forget the statistic. But there's a statistic in New York of how few people actually agreed with legalized abortion.
Yeah. Speaking of Roe v. Wade, I find it funny, like how so many people, like they talk about, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. They're like, oh, that means abortion's illegal now and all that. And like some states are now deliberately legalizing abortion, like as a middle finger to the federal government, completely ignoring that was the whole point.
Yeah, they could do what they want to with it one way or
Yeah,
the
it
other.
didn't. It didn't. It didn't. Yeah, if I recall correctly, it didn't say, oh yeah, abortion's now illegal." It just said that it's not the federal government's decision, and it never was. It's up to the states to decide if they want to, if abortion is okay or not. So
What is up with the statists missing or not understanding that drug legalization is not the reason for the increase of dirty streets and crime? I see them use it as an argument and I don't see a response. Well, just because it's a complete non sequitur.
well,
They're
yeah, that's
looking
one
for a
thing.
reason to be against drug legalization. And so they cherry pick areas that have legalized marijuana that also have had, increases in crime or homelessness and go, huh, see, huh? You don't have an answer for that, do you? Ha, 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 ha. That's what they do.
That's the same thing I don't really like about. That's the one thing I do criticize with some guys, like for instance, actual Justice Warrior. One thing I don't agree with him on is that he thinks the increase in crime in a lot of these cities is because see they're going light on crime, they're defunding the police, and now people think they can get away. It's like, no, they're doing this because, as we pointed out, it's like, yeah, they are decriminalizing a lot of stuff, but they're still going after people who are defending themselves.
But notice that it didn't happen that way in Amsterdam and it didn't happen that way in Portugal. And there are plenty
Yeah.
of other places, even in America, that you can point to where it didn't shake out that way.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing is a city or a state doing something like legalizing small amounts of marijuana doesn't take away the black market in other areas or the market for other drugs.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what's it supposed to do against fentanyl?
Yeah.
Fentanyl should make it obvious. I mean, just completely obvious how much of a failure the drug war is. But no, they look at fentanyl and say, see, that's why we got to have the war on drugs. It's like you had the war on drugs for 50 years. The result was fentanyl.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny how the left, accuses the right of supporting right wing of supporting conspiracies and all. If I've met actual leftists that are like, oh, the whole U.S. healthcare system is rigged to make you sick and get you addicted to these painkillers, so you're a lifelong patient.
Republicans say they're pro small government. They're also for the war on drugs. Yeah, they are not small government. I got tons of videos on
Yeah.
that. And I also
Mhm.
just recently posted up a video on tariffs because that's another one of Trump's big things this year is tariffs, and very much protectionist tariffs, specifically tariffs against China and Mexico and for things like the auto industry and things like that, exactly like the tariffs of abomination that almost caused a civil war 20 years earlier.
Oh, but that was caused by slavery, not tariffs.
Well, I'm talking about in the 1840s when
Yeah,
it,
I
it
know
came
that. Yeah.
came really close to that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I got a video on how the people who are arguing for tariffs are every bit as economically ignorant as Marxists, because you have to go, more than 200 years back, almost 300 at this point, to get to the point where we didn't know about the effects of, well, maybe not quite 300, but definitely 200. to
Speaking of the
know
Still
about
War,
how trade works.
there's this one YouTuber that made an entire series making fun of Otto Shane, or I can never pronounce his name.
About who
The
now?
guy behind the what?
Who are you talking about?
Otto Shane, that cringy, guy who has that checkmate Lincolnites thing where he tries to insist that, oh yeah, the American Civil War was 100 about slavery and nothing else.
Is he the one who always has like two sides of the screen? One side where he's dressed as Johnny
Yeah,
Reb, and the other where he's dressed in Union
yeah,
gear. Yeah,
yeah,
God, that guy.
yeah. There's actually this one YouTuber. He's called like Little Brutes Production or something, and he actually literally has a large series now called Checkmate Auton Shea, where he actually points out and he uses actual documents from the time to prove his point, whereas Auton Shea just cherry picks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now the rail strike in my country is going to make a shit economy even shittier. What country is that? If he actually gets rid of income tax, I'd take the trade, but he definitely won't do that. He says he will. We'll pay for everything with tariffs and won't be income tax. Nah. Or he'll just make the deficit even bigger.
Yeah, strikes. Going back to that thing about insanity, that's another thing too. It's like look at the history of it, and when has striking ever worked?
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet workers still do it. It's literally no different. It's literally no different than forming an angry mob outside a city hall and going rabble, rabble, rabble.
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember that South Park joke? It's like,
oh yeah,
it's like we gotta do something about this. Yes, but standing out here going rabble, rabble, rabble isn't gonna fix anything. Well, we don't know what else to do. Yeah, at least the people
you're
were
just
honest
trying
there.
to do it through force, and force doesn't work.
Yeah.
In capitalism, if you see something that you think is being done wrong, then do it yourself and do it better.
Yeah. Reminds me of this one joke I posted in a YouTube comment one time, and it was showing like this speech, from this one cartoon, where a woman's holding an organization in front of the mayor, and she's like, "We need a better community," and she lists all these ideas and plans she has, for how to make their community actually good and all that. And I replied in the comment section is like, if I was the mayor, I would have said, "Wow, you got some nice ideas. What the hell do you need me for?" Yeah.
Trudeau refused to force arbitration between the union and the company. So this is Canada. How much does Canada rely on rail? Because it's a big, sparsely populated country like we are. And is the rail like going from like one province to another, or is it rail just kind of locally within a city?
Mr. No says it's a lot.
Yeah, but like from one part of the country and another, like instead of airplanes or mass transit in a city. He just says yes. I don't know what that is yes to.
Are you referring to yes as in his answer to Canada, or yes the band?
How did Rick Wakeman get into this all of a sudden?
Rick
Very
who?
important to national wide. Oh, are you talking? Is it cargo trains then, or?
I mean, that could be what he's talking about as cargo trains, maybe.
Yeah, I got a few videos where I talk about Hoppians. One especially where I talk about, God, what does he call it? Where he tries to make it a contradiction where you argue against freedom and you're using your freedom to argue against it. I forget what he calls it, but there was an AMA where I covered that. I worry that free speech is neither popular nor profitable for companies to stand for free speech. If companies can just deplatform. Well, if you look at that, deplatform whoever they feel like, if you look at every time they've looked at it and they've gone back to it, it's been CISA and DHS and the FBI and everyone behind things pulling the string. Yeah, argumentation ethics, that's what it's called.
Yeah. By the way, many people have. I
supplies and
actually
cargo.
heard.
Yeah,
I can't. I
we've
can't. I
actually
can't.
got a pretty big cargo rail system here in the U.S., believe it or not. I know that
Mm.
because the tracks go on, a side road that I usually take, from my house to get to places. It's not the only route I can go, but I take that, and quite a few times I've been having to wait for the cargo train to go by. Everything going to go up in price because of the strike. Yep. And then the union workers say, hey, yay, we got more money. Wait a minute. Why is everything more expensive?
Yep. Or why are we so short? Or why are we so short staffed now, and we have to pull double duties and double shifts? Mm.
States is a big country with the largest economy. Yeah, I mean that. There's a lot
Yeah,
that goes
speaking of
back and forth. This goes back to Biden shutting down the pipeline, because what happened, that didn't mean that we stopped getting oil from Canada. It just meant they put it on a train. So they were actually, burning coal to get it here. It wasn't helping the environment. He was making it worse.
Yeah. It's another it's another good example that not a lot of people talk about, but I've heard a lot of comedians bring a lot of the older comedians bring this up a lot, and it shows how government can ruin a transportation industry is the airline and all that. Because I saw this one comedy sketch that said where the comedian was like, "What happened to the airliners? When I was when I was, a younger guy, and all that, airlines used to be much more comfortable, and they weren't even technologically advanced back then, yet the planes were really nice. They had double deckers, some of them had restaurants or bars, and I'm like, what happened? And I'm just here thinking the government, that's what happened.
Yep. All those regulations and everything else
Yep.
making it more
Enforcing
expensive.
and
The only
yep.
way you can deal with that is either you got to raise ticket prices, which means you're not going to sell as many tickets, so you can only do that so much, or you cram more people inside the planes.
Yep. Yeah,
Obviously, it's just corporate greed. Yeah, isn't it weird how corporations all of a sudden became more greedy? That's just
yeah.
funny how that happened.
That's what I want to. Yeah, that's really what I want to ask some of those people that say, the result of this inflation is because of corporate greed. To which I say, well, then how come they weren't inflating their prices, before COVID and all that hit? Why, you know,
That's like that clip from Milton Friedman that I made and I share around a lot, where he's talking about it doesn't happen because corporations are greedy, because they've always been greedy. It doesn't happen
yeah,
because consumers are spendthrifty, because they've always been spendthrifty.
yeah,
It happens because you have more money chasing fewer goods and services.
yeah,
They have record profits, but still have low margin. Yeah, record that's where they just, give you the big numbers completely out of context. But it's so many $1 million, it's like, oh my God, millions, that's big.
yeah.
Whereas, and there was a really good one I shared on X where this guy looked at like Kroger, and I think they had like a 2.3% margin or something. And then another one of the big ones had like a 1.6% margin. And he pointed out that if instead of spending all that money on their businesses and groceries, they could have just put it in treasury bills and made over 3%. So they're actually making less money than they otherwise would have, so we can have groceries. So how is that price gouging? How is that greed? Greed would be, yeah, fuck your groceries, I'm going to get this bigger return. I'm going to say it again. They're making less money so you and I can have groceries. That's capitalism.
Oh man, I was just rereading this funny thing about what I said earlier about the airlines, about how this one comedian said that it's like, he said, when I was a younger man on the airliner, you know what it meant if you put in the money to get a first class ticket, you were treated like royalty. You got all this cool stuff. You got comfy. Some of those seats could even be converted into beds. So if you were taking a longer flight, you could actually take a nap. Now what's modern day first class like? You get to sit at the front of the plane and you get to choose beer instead of soda when they serve refreshments.
And the seats are slightly bigger.
Yeah. I mean, you were probably old enough to remember this. Do you remember airplanes being a little bit more comfortable than they are today?
First flight I took, that would have been when I went to Worldcon in Boston. What was that, 88?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it was still like you were in seats, but I mean, there was stuff that was a lot nicer, like the food was nicer. You actually, even if you were in coach, as they used to call it, I don't know what they'd call it today, but the cheap seats,
Economy class.
yeah, whatever it is, they'd still give you like food.
Yeah.
They give you food and a drink. Now you're lucky if you get, some soda and maybe a little
nowadays.
packet of something.
Nowadays, even on those really long flights, it's usually just okay. Yep, here's some crackers and your options of juice or soda.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
People
some
who
people
want
are like,
to
and some people are like, well, it's greed from the flight industry. It's like, well, yeah, but the flight industry is also one of the most heavily regulated transportation industries in the world. So,
people who want to decouple the U.S. from auth countries because they think free trade will only embolden the auth countries and independence from to be self-sufficient. Well, the more authoritarian you are, the more free trade hurts you. That's all there is to it.
yeah, why do you think North Korea is cut off from the entire world, and they only do very limited trade with China and Russia?
Yeah.
And contrary to what some lefties say, it's not because of the United States embargo. If I recall correctly, there is no embargo between the U.S. and North Korea. It's literally because of their Juche ideology. Yeah. That's another thing too. A lot of dictators, they oppose the idea of free trade because a lot of times they go for things what they call, oh, we want our nation to be autocratic and self-reliant. That's the freaking reason why Africa is poor, because when a lot of the African nations gained independence, their leaders were like, yeah, we're not going to be white colonialists anymore. We're going to completely cut off the European world. We'll never be enslaved anymore. And why the hell is our infrastructure crumbling, and why are all the productive people leaving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest reason for someone to vote for Trump over Harris, if they aren't super into politics, is the fact that Kamala wants price controls. Yeah, that hurt her a lot.
Yeah.
Talking about price controls.
Mm.
And which one time with Sweden? What are you talking about there, Groofus? And she's a major gun grabber, yeah. Most Democrats, rank and file Democrats, if you talk to them, they might say, oh, well, we need gun control. You say, well, what gun control do we need? And they'll talk about things like, the registry and things like that. But it's like, do you think we should actually confiscate guns from people? Do you actually think we should just stop the sale of firearms and ammo entirely? They're like, oh, no. And they don't realize that that's exactly what the party apparatchik wants to do.
Okay, so Admiral Griffiths said in the 1980s, North Korea briefly opened up with Sweden, and Sweden sold them cars, and North Korea basically sent them an IOU and never paid them back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of helps if you pay.
Yeah.
They probably couldn't pay, that's the truth.
Yeah.
Didn't have the money.
Oh yeah, they can't pay. There's North Korean defectors that have said, the fact of the matter is, even the Kim family, in charge of the Communist Party, even they don't have the money to pay for a lot of the stuff. A lot of the people who work for them and give them all this fancy stuff, they do it because they're under threat of duress.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the Communist Party says we want cheeseburgers, for our meeting, you get them those cheeseburgers regardless, often at your own expense. Because if you don't, well, what happens to people who disobey the dear leader?
1,000 Volvos in the 70s. Just looked it up.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, law of comparative advantage, I went over it again, and it's counterintuitive But if you look at like the example I came up with planes and cars, and you think about it, it's like, yeah, that does work, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and of course you gotta love it when people are like, "Oh, but many other countries like China and all that, they have really high, and the European Union, they have high, they have tariffs, and they force American companies to pay tariffs. So why should we have to play by their rules?" And we point this out because it means American goods that get in there. If we don't, it means it's much easier to do business with the United States. So it tempts a lot of those countries to say, you know what, screw the European Union, screw China, let's set up our company in the U.S.
Yeah, tariffs only hurt the company, the country imposing the tariffs.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of economic historians that now believe that had the Smith-Hartley tariff not gone into effect, the Great Depression wouldn't have been as bad as it was.
Yeah, would have still happened. It's not the cause of the
Yeah,
depression, but yeah, it
yeah,
made
it
it a
would have
lot
it's,
worse.
it would have still happened, but it wouldn't have been as bad, because at least
Yeah.
then we could have relied on foreign capital, mainly from the UK coming in to at least provide some relief. But the government was like, nope, we're gonna launch these to stimulate the economy and keep American businesses from going out of business. We're gonna place all these really high tariffs on all these countries, and the UK and many other nations said, well, screw you then. We're not doing business with the US.
Well, and at the same time, they started just ignoring the gold standard because because of the way the capital was going. That meant because of the currency exchanges that in order to balance it all out, I think this is in my inflation video talking about where all the gold came in primarily from the UK to balance it out, and it would have been fine if they had followed the rules of the gold standard and used that money, to create, new specie, new dollars based on gold. But they didn't. They just locked it away and didn't do anything with it.
Yep.
And that meant that the banks didn't have anything now to back up all of the money that they owed to people.
By the
And
way,
that
I've
just
seen
led
some
to the
people.
failures.
I've seen some people say, this is kind of stupid. They say, well, the reason why the central bank, didn't, why the federal bank didn't save us from the Great Depression is because they didn't do their jobs. Had we had a central bank that was willing to do its job, it wouldn't have happened.
Well, in a way, they're right because the whole justification for the Fed was to step in and be the lender of last resort at exactly in that very case, in the case that very thing happens. And they didn't do that.
Yeah.
The very
Of course.
thing in the very scenario, just like the CDC with COVID, that was supposed to be their moment to shine. That was the whole justification for their existence. That was everything they had set up for.
Yeah.
And it didn't quite work out, did it?
By the way, someone in one of my Discord servers actually, still blames Trump for COVID being as bad as the way it was and all that. And
He shares the
like
blame. He shares blame. A lot of it is his fault.
but not for the reason people think. They think, he shares the blame because he was like, oh, he kept, the US open and he didn't lock down sooner and all that. It's like, no.
Well, he was trying to lock down.
Yeah.
He was trying to stop, the countries that had COVID. He was trying to, put the travel restrictions on them, and they went, "That's racist. You can't do that."
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
funny.
that's
It's funny how.
that's something that might have delayed things. It wouldn't have stopped COVID coming in, but it would have delayed
Oh yeah.
things.
Oh
But I
yeah.
mean, he did some good things. I have to give him credit for, like we were talking about when, they're like all these the first responders and the hospital workers and everything, they needed masks, and they weren't able to do it because it wasn't the company that made the masks, but it was the company that what was it? They had to do something to get the masks sterile and get them ready to sell. And the FDA said, like, well, you're only allowed to do 10,000 of those a day. And that's why there was such a shortage. And Trump basically went in and said, what? That's stupid. Stop that.
Yeah.
So there's some things he deserves credit for.
Yeah. And speaking of COVID, I saw this one guy who said who brought up a really good point. He says one of his least favorite like in post apocalyptic stories, one of his least favorite causes of an apocalypse is a pandemic and all that. And it's like, well, yeah, because it kills all these people and it brings down massive societal collapse and chaos and anarchy reigns supreme. And the guy points out, well, if that's the case, then human civilization should have ended in the 14th century with the Black Death.
Yeah.
Because the Black Death was literally everything a lot of those, post-apocalyptic diseases had. It was highly contagious, highly deadly, it spread everywhere, and unlike today, they didn't have the luxury of modern-day antibiotics and all that stuff like that, and yet, we're still alive.
Well, it wiped out, what, over a third of Europe?
Yeah.
And, took down entire cities?
Yeah. I mean, it did do that, obviously, but this idea that it would cause, a global, societal breakdown and lead to the apocalypse, that's bullshit,
No, it didn't do that.
Yeah.
As bad as it was, it still couldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually heard from actual scientists that have said that, contrary to what some people think, it's actually impossible for an illness to cause a global mass extinction. It's never happened in recorded history.
Yeah.
Because really, when you think about it, it's counterintuitive for the bacteria. Like why would a microbe, want to become so deadly that it wipes out everything?
Well, and look at what happens with the really deadly ones like Ebola. Yeah, it's bad, and there's a lot of misery, and a lot of people die, and then it goes away really quickly.
Yeah.
The two things are not unrelated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I forgot what it's called. It's called the forest fire. It's like some epidemiologists, they call it the forest fire effect, where yeah, there are viruses out there that are super contagious and deadly, but the reason why they don't cause mass outbreak is because they're just too successful. They go in, they kill everyone, but then that means the people die before they can travel to another side of the country.
Well, the thing about the lockdowns is that's just the wrong thing. And I was actually saying this before the Great Barrington Declaration came out, and then it came out, because that was the scientific consensus at the time, which is what you do is you quarantine the sick and you protect the people who are at risk. You protect the seniors, you protect the retirement homes, and
the really young children.
And then
the young
you
children.
let the healthy people live their lives.
Yeah.
And that was the whole, you want to kill grandma thing. It's like, they just said, let people die. That is not what it said at all. But that's the rhetoric. And the question is, if you've got science on your side, why do you need to resort to that kind of rhetoric?
Yep. Oh yeah, and it's another thing too, because I brought this up too in some of my Discord groups and all that, where we disagree, where people are like, oh, but Republicans are spreading, myths about the vaccines and all that, and I'm like, well, to be fair, maybe if the government wouldn't stop lying or stop having a holier than thou had stopped having a holier than thou mentality, people probably would have trusted the science more.
Just be transparent with it.
Yeah. If they were transparent and all that, people would be much more likely to trust them, but they can't. They kept saying, oh, if you do this, you won't get COVID. Oh, what's that? You're doing that and you're getting COVID? Well, okay, what we really mean is if you do that, And then when you say, listen, you said that the last time and it's not working, and then you go, I am the science, you must do what I say because I know what's better than you. Naturally, people are not going to do that.
Many people deny the virus existence, then its origins. We still don't know the origins, and we probably never will. We'll probably never know for sure if it was a lab leak.
Oh, yeah.
Because they just cut off all investigation into that completely arbitrarily.
Yeah, And to be fair, that's another reason, the whole conspiracy of it being a bioweapon probably wouldn't be around, like I said, if there was transparency, if people, weren't questioning, saying, wait a minute, how come some of the first people to get sick were lab workers at the Wuhan lab? It was caused by cross-contamination with an animal. Yeah, but you were conducting, gain of function researches on animals using coronaviruses. It was caused by an animal contact. Yeah, but it was caused by animal contact.
Where was the animal? Was it an animal at the Wuhan lab?
Yeah. If they
would have just doing animals, or were they doing it all in vitro, or what? We don't know. We don't know anything.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I know nothing. I'm not a scientist, but I still find it kind of funny. It's like, well, why were you creating this? Why did you create a super highly contagious mutated respiratory virus? Well, we were doing a gain of function so we could see how we could prevent viruses from mutating and infecting humans. So you mutated a virus so it could infect humans.
Yeah, and by doing that, they can study more about the virus. There are good reasons to do that, and there were probably several labs all over the globe that were doing that. It's just that apparently this Wuhan lab just doesn't have um, the same
Eh.
systems in place to stop an infection from
Yeah,
escaping.
like
And
like I personally believe it was a lab leak, but I'm not one of those people that think, oh yeah, China was developing a bioweapon. No, I think it was
no,
just
no, no.
given what we know about the Chinese about how the Chinese government operates, it was probably just good old fashioned government incompetency.
Yeah, they just didn't have the right measures in
Yeah,
place to prevent it. And one of the scientists there got sick with the virus and left and spread the virus to other people.
yeah,
And I
oh
mean, it's
yeah,
as
yeah,
simple as
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it was probably just, some guy got sneezed on by one of the animals they were working on. He started coming down with, a really bad cold, and rather than saying, "Uh-oh, quarantine him and let's make sure nobody leaves this place until he gets better or something happens," they're just like, just go home and sleep it off. You'll be okay." Mm.
Feels like the left are doing so much to make believing Trump seem perfectly reasonable. Yeah.
And to be fair, that's actually the reason why it got out in the first place was because the Chinese government was covering it up.
Yeah.
When several of their scientists and people were getting sick, China was like, "Nope, nope. There's nothing going on. It's just a regular cold and flu season. Nothing to worry about. What's this? More people are getting sick. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. What's this? It's spreading to the entire world. Okay, maybe something's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe something's going on.
Yeah. Just be open about it and you can save a lot of lives. But yeah,
Yeah,
well, I mean, it was just like the Soviet Union after Chernobyl. They tried
yeah,
covering it up, and then, nuclear plants in Sweden and other places were like, wait a minute, we're picking up a lot of radiation. Where's that coming from?
yeah.
And as a result, a lot of people don't trust nuclear power when the real lesson is you shouldn't trust
Hmm.
socialists.
I still find it funny how people still cite the 3 Mile Island and say it as a proof of why nuclear power is dangerous. Yet 3 Mile Island is a perfect example of how safe nuclear energy is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because that was a really terrible situation, but it was still contained because unlike Chernobyl, they had a containment building
yep,
and no one got the only radiation that there was that got outside of containment was what got out in the controlled release. Government lies to the people and they're surprised when people don't believe them. Well, and how many people really doubt that in every election there's some hinky stuff going on that looks like someone's trying to stuff ballot boxes or manipulate the machines or anything like that? Happens every single election, every primary, every general, state level, federal level, local level, and lawsuits and everything else, and people going back, except for the 2020 presidential election. And don't you dare suggest there's anything wrong with that one.
yep.
And what do you expect people to conclude
Yeah,
when you do that?
I've even asked that to some people, that criticize January 6th. It's like, what better way to show how idiotic the Trump supporters are by actually investigating the election and coming up and saying, "Yep, we've conducted an independent, research and we have concluded Joe Biden won fair and square." What a perfect middle finger, to the Trump campaign. But no, you had to be all like, "Nope, it was fair. We say so." But what about the reports of the machines acting all funky? It was a fair election. Mm. And you know what's the dumbest argument I've ever heard? Some people said, "Well, that would have taken up time and resources to do all that." It's like, wow, really?
Yeah. We can't even look to make sure the election was okay.
Yeah,
Doesn't that sound a lot like what the Soviet Union said every time a new premier was elected?
yep. Or every time Hugo Chavez got elected,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yep, the people ran in. Yep, he won by a 100% vote. When anyone will say, I don't care how popular you are, no presidential campaign gets a 100% vote.
Yeah.
Like, if I recall correctly, the only president that won on a near landslide victory was James Monroe, and contrary to popular belief, he didn't do that because one guy did it out of principle. Like, the person who didn't vote for him genuinely didn't like him. Yeah. Yeah, you're familiar with that story, right, Shane, about James Monroe?
Yeah, vaguely. He won by he got like all of the electoral votes except one. I forget the total.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot the name, but there was a story that, the reason why the guy did it was because, well, he felt that nobody except George Washington should win unanimously. But the thing is, the elector that didn't vote for him gave his reason for why he didn't vote for him, and he said, because I didn't like how he acted during his first presidential term. Yeah.
Government lies, then other governments echo their lies.
Yeah.
I don't mind
Oh
these
yeah, there was.
experiments because they're useful, but they should be held accountable. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I look at it like this: teams in the NFL throw games and cheat. Why would anyone think that people wouldn't try to cheat in the most powerful country's elections? Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I mentioned this in a previous podcast before, but there's this thing I coin myself. I call it the Blackwater effect, where people, it's kind of like the love canal fallacy, where people like to point out, like, oh, but look at all this corruption, in this one private organization, and then you point out, yeah, and you know what happened when that private company or organization was uncovered to be corrupt and cheating? It got punished. Now compare that to the government.
Well, and what you have today, where at the latest DEF CON, they had to move Voter Village out from the main floor out to a separate area because they got threats of violence against them.
Yeah.
How dare you check our voting machines to see if there are security flaws in them?
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I call it the Blackwater effect. It's a reference to an incident where the Blackwater security company, a couple of their mercenaries opened fired and killed unarmed Iraqi civilians, and it was a major scandal and controversy, and everyone was saying, oh, see, this is why mercenaries are evil and cruel and need to be punished and all that. And many people pointed out, well, yeah, they did a horrible thing, but here's the thing: the mercenaries that committed the act, up until Donald Trump acquitted them, they were punished. They were put on trial and they were sent to prison for manslaughter. Now if the U.S. military had done something like that, almost nothing would have happened. Yeah, maybe a couple
They
of guys
did
would have
do
been
something like
court-martialed.
that. Julian Assange exposed it.
Yeah,
Look what happened to him.
yeah,
I feel like I can't be pro-choice because I would want my mom to be stopped from aborting me even at the very beginning. Yeah, but if you give government power to do that, what else could they
Yeah.
do with that power?
yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm kind of weird with it, because people ask me what my opinion on abortion is, and my personal opinion is I'm against it, but from a political principle purpose. I do consider myself pro-choice, just because the fact of that matter is there is a demand, for abortions, and when government tries to ban a good or service that's in demand, we know what happens. Yeah.
Yep, just like with the war on drugs, just like with
Yep.
prohibition, just like if you ban
Yep.
guns, just like if you restrict immigration.
Yeah.
Work it out, people!
Yeah. Like, yeah, like if someone I know is, like if there's a girl I know and she's pregnant and like she wants to abort the baby for no other reason than that she doesn't want it, I will do everything I can to talk her out of it, but I'm not gonna lobby someone to send police to her house with guns to arrest her if she even considers it.
I think the power should be given to medical ethics boards, because
Yeah.
they're already in charge of a lot of decisions, at these hospitals and
Yeah.
clinics and all these groups that clinics are a part of.
Yeah.
And if you can trust them to make decisions about who gets a kidney or not, this person's going to live and this person's going to die because we need to choose who gets the kidney. If you're going to trust them with that decision, then you can trust them, I think, with the ethics of
Yeah.
abortion and what abortions are allowed, what abortions aren't.
Oh yeah.
At what point, do you want to start putting more restrictions on abortion? And then they would just be making the decision just for their
Yeah.
hospital or just for their medical group and not trying to impose it on everyone else.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, hospitals already do stuff like that.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Did
Oh yeah. So
a doctor does a surgery and something goes wrong and the patient dies and they're there figuring out, okay, did the doctor do something wrong or was that just an unfortunate, reaction
yeah.
that was unavoidable or yeah.
Yeah.
Here's this new elective or experimental procedure. Should we allow that at our hospital or whatever?
Reminds me of this really cringy political ad I saw from the Democratic Party online, and it was like, and they were talking about how Republicans will want to outlaw abortion, keep the government out of the doctor's office, and I'm like, well, then why are you guys want to get into the doctor's office so badly?
They want government
Yeah.
in the doctor's office on literally everything else.
Yeah. I mean, heck, there's some people that literally want the government to be the doctor's office.
Alden, there are lots of things that are human rights violations that I don't want the government doing anything about because I don't trust them to do it, and I don't trust them not to abuse the power.
Oh yeah. I still find it funny where like I talk to a lot of people in America and some of them go, it's like, oh, if only we were like the UK and it was government run and all that. And I'm like, I don't know. I know British people on Discord, some of whom are dear friends of mine, and they all say it sucks ass. And you know what their response is? Well, you can't please everyone.
I've got relatives in the UK who will tell you about that. It's just horrible stuff because my stepfather was Scottish.
Yeah. Aren't all people with the surname Killian, aren't they all Scottish?
No, Killian's an Irish name.
Oh.
But I actually come from the German Killians.
Oh.
Comes from St. Killian.
Yeah. Yeah, people wonder how is it possible, for people who are not blood relatives and are completely unrelated and have different backstories, and yet they have the same last name. It's because people fail to realize last names are a relatively common thing, and historically they weren't necessarily to signify your family; they were to signify where you came from.
Yeah, because the followers of St. Killian took on his name, and then they went to Germany and got converts. And those converts took on the last name Killian, even though they weren't related.
Yeah.
That happened. The whole thing about a surname being a family name that's passed down and passed down and passed down. That's only in like the last 500 years or so.
Yeah.
And you see that if you do genealogy going back.
Oh yeah.
You see the point where that breaks down.
Yeah. Speaking of genealogy, I love it, when you see those black supremacists on YouTube and TikTok and all that, and they take a genealogy test, and like, I can't wait to find out what African village I come from, where my family comes from, and they find out that, well, yes, physically they're black, genetically they're white.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it turns out, oh, what's this? Okay, so the genealogy test traces you back to your great-great-grandma. So I did some family research, and what's this? My great-great-grandma was a mixed-race woman. She was the daughter of a black woman, of a black slave and a white man. Oh. Yeah, shocking as it is to believe people, I don't know what the term was for it, but there were people that purchased slaves not because they wanted them to work, but literally because the white nobleman legitimately fell in love with the black woman, and the only way he could marry her was he had to purchase her.
If people have asked Europeans if they would want the EU to run their healthcare instead of the individual countries. Oh man. Can you imagine?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's
Well, that's the thing. Blacks are like, oh, well, we're blacks and therefore our ancestors were enslaved. Well, look at Kamala. One side of her family is actually Indian. The other side, the side where she's getting, black from, is actually Jamaican and from Jamaican aristocracy which was slave owners, not
Oh
slaves.
yeah, yeah. That's the thing that a lot of these race baiters fail to realize. Black Africans enslaved other black Africans. In fact, where do you think the Europeans got their black slaves from?
Yeah.
Contrary to what Family Guy said, they didn't go in with guns and capture the slaves at gunpoint. They literally purchased them from local chiefs. You know,
Or mostly from the Ashanti.
yeah,
Because
yeah. Reminds me,
trade with the Ashanti was really important.
yeah. It reminds me of It reminds me of when a lot of those politicians, when some of those black politicians wore, those quote unquote traditional African, garbs in honor of George Floyd and all that. And many actual African historians pointed out, you do realize that those kinds of garbs, they were typically worn by the African aristocracy, and more often than not, these African aristocrats owned slaves themselves.
There's his father's a Marxist economist. Yeah, and that's what that Jamaican aristocracy is. They're all Marxist communists that, tried to keep Jamaica under their screws, and I think to a certain extent still do.
Yeah, I know you don't like it when we talk about the Civil War, but that's another misconception about slavery. Pre-Civil War is that many people fail to realize it wasn't whites enslaving blacks. Slave owners came in all colors. You know, there were Chinese slave owners, there were African American slave owners, there were Indian slave owners.
Yeah, it was just a fact. People owned slaves,
Yeah,
and they didn't really much care where the slaves come from. In fact, the Ashanti trade with the Ashanti was going on for something like 200 or 300 years before they started getting slaves from them, and it was because they had started doing the plantations in the Virgin Islands where it was hot, and what they were primarily enslaving were the Irish, and they would send Irish slaves to Barbados and places like that, and like 50% of them will be dead within 5 years.
yeah. If I
Because
recall
those little
correctly,
ginger
that's
Irishmen just couldn't take the heat. And then it's like, wait a minute. We trade with people who have these other slaves who seem to be able to take the heat better.
yeah. Fun fact, yeah. Fun fact, people. That's where the term redneck came from.
Yep.
It came from because there were white slaves and they just couldn't handle the heat, and as a result they would suffer from severe skin burns because of being in the heat all day. And a derogatory word by their master was, oh look, it's the rednecks.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, but if USJWs are saying that white people need to stop calling Indians redskins and black and African Americans black, then you need to stop. Then you need to stop calling Southern people rednecks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Reich is a total grifter, but Wolf, on some level, Wolf has to know it's bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, he just does too much for him not to
Yeah.
know. But yeah, he's probably drinking his own medicine to a degree.
Yeah. Oh
It's
yeah.
probably
I
one of
mean,
those where he thinks that, he thinks it's the noble lie because he's doing it for a good cause and not for the enrichment of him and his cronies, which is what motivates Reich.
yeah. Yeah. Speaking of which, it's really sad. A lot of them, and a lot of them, a lot of the people, a Discord group I'm on where I encounter a lot of this economic illiteracy and all that. It's mainly composed of people who used to be ex Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm not gonna lie, I get so sad when I see people like that. It's like you escaped a religious cult only to fall for the cult of the omnipotent state.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's like you didn't really learn the lesson there, did you?
yeah. Did I ever tell you I saw one person when I brought this up, about how libertarians are the atheists in the political field and all that, and one person said, no, they're flat earthers because they deny the existence of government. It's like, we don't deny the existence of government,
Well, in a
saying,
sense, we do because we point out that government is an abstract concept, and what it really
yeah.
is people doing things.
Oh
And
yeah,
they don't act with any greater moral authority than
and I
any other
and I
moral
pointed
actor.
this out to the person, and then they blocked me. I said, "Listen, saying, statism is the way to go because government exists. That's like saying, well, then God must exist because the Roman Catholic Church exists.
Yeah.
if God didn't exist, we wouldn't have had churches. Yeah, perfect logic. Yeah, it reminds me of what Hoodie Demon said before he left. He was like saying that capitalism is this, that, and this, that because Das Kapital said so. That's like saying, well, then God exists and his word is absolute. Why? Because the Bible exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I miss
Speaking of
Hoodie.
which, TIK history, he did a video not too long ago where he actually looked at the history of Karl Marx, and turns out Karl Marx was not the humble, noble philosopher that people thought he was. He
Oh,
was actually
definitely
kind of a
not.
jerk. He was actually kind of a jerk.
He was the world's biggest jerk. Guy was a
Oh
total
yeah.
ass.
Oh yeah. And people, will be like, well, that's just, pro, but that's just bourgeois propaganda. And guess what? The sources he uses to prove that Marx is not a really nice guy. He's literally using notes from Marx's wife and Frederick Engels, basically telling Marx, "Hey, Marx, you got to get off your ass and start working on the Communist Manifesto. The investors are coming after me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
why
you miss Hoodie D.
Engels co-wrote it, because if he just left it up to Marx, he never would have gotten done with it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
George R.R. Martin would finish Game of Thrones before Marx finished Communist Manifesto.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I didn't get that South Park episode with George R. R. Martin at first, particularly the pizza joke where it's like, don't worry, the pizzas are coming. They are coming. And I didn't get that at first. Then I spoke to actual Game of Thrones fans and I asked them, what's that all about? And they said, don't get me wrong, we like the Game of Thrones books and, the show is pretty good. But unfortunately, George R. R. Martin has a bad habit of plotting something big happening and then he either doesn't get to it or he keeps delaying it.
Yeah, because he sets it up and then he doesn't really know what he's doing.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a plan, and
yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of why the TV show went off the rails, because they wrote past George R.R. Martin and they're like, well, what do we do now? We gotten past the books, and so they were just kind of winging it from there.
Yeah. And, so many people like actually it brings me up a pretty good point. Like so many people, criticize, Game of Thrones fans, critics, and like, oh, you just don't like it because a lot of people, because there's a lot of death and violence and many people, and you want happy fairy tale endings. It's like, no, we can handle, main characters dying, but but from a strictly story standpoint, there's got to be a good reason for that to happen,
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, if I recall correctly, this is an old saying. They say the only time you should kill off a main character is if one of the two criteria are met. Either one, basically the character's plot has been done and there's nothing more you can do with them, and two, the story could be advanced if that person dies. Like maybe the hero can learn a valuable lesson from it. You don't just kill them off for the sake of shock value.
Yeah.
Because if anything, it produces the exact opposite effect, and you actually lose incentive to want to handle characters because you know what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. The guy's going to form an alliance. He's going to get betrayed, and then he's going to die. Why should I care? Once out of curiosity, I actually came up with a story idea involving Game of Thrones, and one person who actually read the book said it was actually a good idea, and I have never read Game of Thrones before. And I had this idea about a prince who he wants to end the war like Daenerys wants to, but he actually has a much greater idea. See, he travels to a far off world where he discovers gunpowder, and he and his countrymen and mercenaries learn how to develop guns. They come back and they bring their guns, and they use their guns to defeat other kingdoms. And here's another trick too. He's actually handing out the technology to make firearms to the people, and he points it out to a nobleman. That way, when I go and a usurper tries to take over, the people will have the means to keep on to the policies I implement.
Yep.
Yeah, like I've said it before. I think it's no coincidence that the Enlightenment era came about when firearms became practical weapons. Because then kings realized, oh shit, we can't rely on legions of hired knights to oppress the people now, because they have a weapon that can kill our knights.
Yep.
Yeah.
Goes right through armor.
Yeah.
Griffith says there's going to be a surprise guest at the DNC. I hadn't heard that.
Wonder if it's Matt Walsh. I know he's been doing that, Don't get me
It's
wrong,
kind of
I
one of those
disagree.
things, if you expect them, it wouldn't be a surprise. Like, it would make sense if Obama spoke, or maybe he did. I
Yeah.
don't know. I haven't been keeping up. But
Like, don't get me wrong, I disagree with Matt Walsh on a lot of things, but you gotta give the guy his kudos. He really knows how to troll the left.
yeah.
My personal favorite was when that one cringy leftist tried to dismiss his book Johnny the Walrus by saying, and the person was going, oh, look at all those children, they're confused by his big language and all that, and people fail to realize the book Johnny the Walrus isn't necessarily for children. It's a mockumentary. It's a mock children's book. It's making fun of how there's a lot of social justice activists out there that are saying if your kid says that they're a woman, you have to treat them like a woman and all that. And the whole story is that Johnny, like any kids, he's pretending to be an animal. He's pretending to be a walrus, and all these activist doctors tell him, well, you got to start treating him like an actual walrus now. You got to feed him raw fish. You got to keep him in a water. And Johnny's like, I don't want to be a walrus anymore.
From what I'm looking up, the speculation is that they'll be either Beyonce or Taylor Swift.
Mm,
Because you know how that goes.
yeah. Speaking of famous celebrities, my childhood was Mark Hamill ruined my childhood.
Separate the actor from the character.
I know, yeah. I mean, I've known, for the longest time that Mark Hamill is kind of a leftist because I know he's made fun of Trump several times, but like he went way too far that one time. Yeah. Although I have heard from a lot of people that some people think that, even though he is a Democrat, he tries to be apolitical, and some people think that Disney pressured him, to say that because, it's the in thing to do,
Yeah.
Yeah. It really wouldn't surprise me.
It wasn't really until then that he started, talking politics.
Yeah,
I think a lot of that might be it. It's like, okay, we're paying you to do Star Wars, and as part of that, under your contract, you have to do these commercials for us or whatever.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard the same thing happen with Harrison Ford. Like, Harrison Ford, while he has gone on record and talked about his political issues, he's a pretty private guy, and he really only got into, he only really appeared in political activism only, like, during the height of his popularity in the 80s and 90s, basically.
That's apparently been been a thing with the conventions for a while. Like if you're in a popular genre series or something like that, and I think this was tied in with why Mark Shepard left Supernatural. But it's like it's in your contract that you have to do all these convention appearances.
Oh yeah, John Stossel interviewed I forgot the guy's name, but he played Hercules in like this old, TV series that was really popular back in the 80s. He played Hercules and
Kevin Sorbo.
Hercules what?
Kevin Sorbo.
Yeah, and Kevin Sorbo, they asked him like, why did you get abandoned? Why'd you lose jobs even though everyone said you were a great actor? And part of it was because he is purely politically independent, and the networkers kept saying you got to appear in like these environmental and these political things, and he's like, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to do my job and act. And basically they lost touch with him.
Yep.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of there was this one funny commercial that they did, and it starred the actor who played the kid from the Karate Kid and all that, and I forgot his name, but they brought him in, and they're like, and like his girlfriend's there and all, and they're like, honey, we need to talk. You are a terrible person. Why are you so clean? Why do you not do anything? Can't you at least be caught, doing drugs with a hooker at some point? It's embarrassing. They're making fun of the fact that one of the reasons why he's not as famous anymore is simply because he's a pretty clean guy and doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
Outside of acting. Yeah. As hard as it is, as we want to admit it, South Park was right when they did that special on it. Scandals sell,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, Fatty Arbuckle. We should have learned this lesson from Fatty Arbuckle. You
Yep,
know,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, he was 100% innocent beyond a shadow of a doubt, and almost everyone that was present during the event all said, "Yeah, Fatty did nothing to that girl other than try to help her." But as William Randolph Hearst allegedly said when Fatty personally contacted him and said, "Guys, why are you spreading all these lies about me and ruining my career?" And they said, "We gotta sell papers."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Charles Foster Kane in Citizen Kane is based off of Hearst.
Oh yeah, I knew that. I've never seen Citizen Kane, but I've known that.
Oh, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Good movie.
Yeah, by the way, like I saw
apparently, like if you're looking at that thinking, okay, maybe that's a little over the top. Hearst isn't really like that. From what I understand, Hearst was a lot worse. It was a lot more extreme than in the movie.
Oh yeah. The thing is, though, William Randolph Hearst, he's one of those people where he's hated for all the wrong reasons too. Like many people say, like he was he was an evil cutthroat capitalist, you know, that did all this stuff and all that. But from what I understand, a lot of the major bad stuff he did, it was because he was working in cahoots with the government. You know.
Yeah. Even trying to steal the election to get elected president.
Yeah.
Tried to use his newspapers to force it in.
Oh yeah. And the sad reality is that his family became victims of guilt of association.
Yeah.
Like especially his granddaughter Patty Hearst and all that. That's just so sad what happened to her. You know.
But yeah, in case you're wondering, the news media has always been like that. It's nothing
Oh yeah.
new.
Oh yeah.
Just ask H.L. Mencken. Just ask Thomas Jefferson.
Oh yeah. I mean, one of the few episodes of Adam Ruins Everything that I genuinely did like was when he actually came to Trump's defense, because people were saying, "Oh, Trump's throwing all these insults at Hillary and his opponents. That's not an appropriate thing. That's not an appropriate thing a potential president should be saying." And Adam pointed out, "I don't know. Try telling that to John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, because they were saying some pretty mean things to each other during the 1800 election."
Oh yeah, that was big political mudslinging there.
Oh yeah. Like, if I recall correctly, didn't Thomas Jefferson call John Adams a hermaphrodite because he lacks the bravery and intelligence of a man, or the patience or caringness of a woman?
I don't know. That sounds familiar. I remember him referring to him as his rotundity.
Oh yeah, because John Adams
had
couldn't
put on a lot of weight.
Yeah, that, and he couldn't. That, and he kept changing how the president should be addressed. Like at first, you know, he tried saying, you know, the president should be called His Excellency, then His Excellency the President, then His Royal Highness the President. And as he gained weight and kept doing that, that's when Thomas Jefferson started calling, "Hey, I got a name for you, Adams. You're Rodundity."
Yeah, we still do a bit of that, but it's kind of nice that we got rid of most of that, because if you look at a lot of the things that they just do unironically in Britain, they would call someone like the Right Honorable His Excellency Lord so-and-so.
Yeah.
And it's like they just have to keep sticking them on the end there.
Yeah, by the way, I actually learned something interesting about both Canada and the United Kingdom. You know, so many people are like, why do all these politicians in Canada get elected, even though everyone votes against them? And from what I understand, in the UK and Canada, I think it's in the Commonwealth in general, you actually don't get to vote for the individual. You vote for the you only vote for the party, and the party gets to decide who becomes the prime minister.
Yeah.
So if you vote for the Labour Party, and the Labour Party decides we want this guy Tony Blair to be our prime minister, even though everyone hates him, too bad. You voted for Labour, you're voting for Tony.
And that's the reason why we have the Electoral College here.
Yep.
Is because they didn't want a direct election, because they didn't want a democracy. They didn't want a democracy. This is not a democracy. But they also didn't want a situation just like you're saying, where we elect Congress, and then Congress chooses the president, and that kind of makes the president, you know, it kind of makes him beholden to either
Oh yeah,
either Congress or either the party that's in the majority or whatever. So just elect a separate electoral college whose sole job is to pick the president.
Yep. It's one thing. If I could have my way, I would force it to happen every presidential election. And this would be my personal opinion. All presidential candidates during live debates, they can't get prim and proper work. They can't hire professional speechwriters and all that, and they have to show up dressed in their everyday casuals. Because
I think you should just ditch debates entirely and just go with a conversation format.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that'd be a much better idea. Yep, there's no more debates. What's gonna happen is we're gonna put you two in a room and you're just gonna talk to each other. Just about whatever.
And you can take questions, but it's just, a conversational thing.
Yeah.
And you have moderators there to make sure one person doesn't dominate things. But
yeah, and
keep things on track.
Because I mean, John Stossel did an old episode about it back when he was on Fox News and all that. And the fact of the matter is, almost all politicians, when they're up there talking at the podium, they're not acting of their own will. They coach it out. They plan ahead. They're not coming it up through their own wit. They're training for it.
Yeah, they got it in the prompter. It's all about the presentation.
Yep, they hire speech coaches. They hire people. A lot of people actually say that's one of the reasons why Nixon lost the 1960 election was because he was too humble and honest, and he felt, listen, I don't want to wear makeup. I don't want to do all this and that. I actually want to look like my normal everyday self to the people so they can see who I really am. And unfortunately, John F. Kennedy hired, he hired makeup artists and all that, so he looked beautiful, and that's pretty much why he got elected, was because he appeared charismatic and good looking.
Yep.
I mean, fun fact, actually, if I also recall correctly, that's also, many people have actually said that's the reason why Warren Harding won the election, even though he wasn't really popular, was because, and now granted, some of this may have come from the anti-suffrage people, but a lot of people said the only reason he got elected was because he was handsome, and women in the newly elected female, population voted him in because he was handsome. Though to be fair, that wouldn't be far off. Like, if I recall correctly, Abraham Lincoln only grew a beard because one of his female fans said, "Listen, Mr. President, you got to get a beard because you will look handsome, and all the women all over the United States will be demanding their husbands vote for you because you're just so handsome looking." That's the thing you got to remember, people. That person you see up on the debates and all that, they're posing for the camera. They're not acting genuinely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the main points in Fahrenheit 451, since people weren't reading books and didn't learn to think for themselves. They were just voting for president based on who looked good on television.
Yeah. The only thing I disagree with Fahrenheit 451 was that Ray Bradbury felt it was the TV and technology that was leading to authoritarianism, when in real life it's just politicians taking advantage of new technology, and they've been doing that, for millennia,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's just like what people are saying about AI today, about all of the stuff that's like, like when they came out with that video of Trump and Musk dancing to Staying Alive. And like, well, it's funny and all, but how do we know? Well, they can fake everything now. How do we know? It's like, do you really think that this is the first time anyone's been able to fake a video?
Oh, yeah.
Do you really think that fake photography isn't just about as old as photography itself?
Yeah,
Look at what they were doing on silent films in the 1910s. You might think that, okay, all they could do was point a camera at this place, and so they either had to find a location or build all of this, this huge, entry foyer in this fancy mansion where it's taking place in, when really just that tiny little part where the actors are is the only place that exists in reality, and the rest is a matte painting that's put on a pane of glass in front of the camera, and you're just looking through the clear part of the glass at the actors.
Hang on, my mom's calling.
And it's just all blended in. So yeah, there are all these techniques they had back then to do visual effects in ways that and that's kind of what people miss in another debate today, which is CGI versus practical. When in reality, the best thing is a mix of the two because they both have strengths and weaknesses. But you're like, oh, with CGI, there's only this tiny part of it that's real, and all the rest of it is fake, whereas with practical, everything is real. No, with practical, you're just doing it a different way. You're just finding clever ways to composite models or artwork or whatever onto the live action. The technology has changed, but it's the same concept. They're just trying to get more onto the screen than they can actually afford to do in reality. And there was a lot of really, really creative visual effects teams back in the day, back in the 1910s and the 1920s and the silent era. You start looking into it, man, really talented people doing all sorts of amazing things. Having to start basically from scratch because nothing like that had ever existed before in all of human history. But ways of doing all of those optical illusions and everything else to make it seem like things are other than they appear. Is the chat frozen? Do I need to reload it? I'm just going to hit reload just to make sure. Nope. Okay. All right. Make sure it's on live so we're getting them all. But yeah, they were even saying a lot of the stuff, because I lived through this, they were saying a lot of the stuff about CGI that they're saying about AI now. Oh, there's no talent behind it. There's no creativity to it. You just push a button and the computer does all the work for you. Man, I had a nickel for every time someone said that to me. I could retire. Oh, you just push a button and the computer does your stuff. Oh, yes, as if. Nope, you still need a human being to do this whole creativity thing. AI is not that advanced. It's really not. It's amazing. It's a big step forward. But it's not like this thing that it's not what everyone's making it out to be. I've tried to write songs with AI. It sucks right now. Yeah, I did one a couple of weeks ago just as a demonstration. Now, you can use it as a tool for songwriting. If you have your own idea for lyrics and stuff like that, it can help you bring it to life.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing about that. But it is a tool. It is a tool for humans to use.
Yeah, that's the thing I see with AI art, and I've asked people, and like it really triggers them. But I like that was when I point out how is an AI machine any different than a paintbrush?
Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2 was really good because the only CGI with Doc Ock was when he's like climbing around on the buildings and fighting Spider-Man. All the close-up stuff was actual animatronics. And if you actually look close as how you can see like all of the little kinks and catches that the animatronic arms do that no CGI artist would ever think to put in.
Oh, yeah.
But that's also why a lot of those fight scenes are at a greater distance.
I mean,
but yeah, it's all about the art of it because.
Oh yeah,
someone was pointing that out. I think it might have been on a Corridor Crew when they were looking at explosions, and they were looking at like the Disney Marvel explosions, where something explodes and it just goes poof, and it's like, okay, it blew up. But if you look at anime, which is, either hand drawn or, much more primitive computer graphics, not, realistic or anything, it's drawn, but you feel the explosion more. The way it's presented, the way it's impacted, the artistry of it, and not just the technology of it, is what really makes you feel the explosion. And they know how to do that in anime.
Speaking of special effects, and not a lot of people realize this, not all the dinosaurs in the first Jurassic Park movie were CGI. They actually made a giant animatronic T-Rex.
Well, not giant. I think it was like 12 feet high or something. But
yeah,
giant for animatronics.
Yeah, it was still big though. But yeah,
it was big.
Yeah, fun fact.
But it
yeah,
wasn't
fun
like
fact.
the big full-size T-Rex, not the actual size. It was still scale.
Yeah, that's the reason why the scene where the T-Rex smashes through the sunroof, and the children and the actors playing the kids are screaming. Some of those screams were genuine. According to an interview with one of them, they said some of those screams were genuine because you got to remember that was a genuine animatronic that crashed through there, and it genuinely scared them.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was when I think they'd used like a full-sized head for that, where you could see the head coming through in the jaw. I think they made a full-sized. No,
they made for the most part a full-size Tyrannosaurus. Like, yeah, they didn't make the tail or anything, but yeah, for scenes where the T-Rex is standing there like picking stuff up and roaring, they used an animatronic, and they only use CGI when the T-Rex is being in action, like when it's chasing the car or when it's hunting the Gallimimus.
Well, because it's really difficult to make animatronics walk correctly.
Well, yeah, obviously, yeah. That's why as much as I love them, the giant robots you see in the Japanese animes are not really possible scientifically speaking.
Yeah.
They would not be able to move that fast as you see in the movies. They would be very slow and clunky.
They actually did a good job with that in Robotech back in the day. You actually got a sense of scale that these were giant 50-foot mechs.
Yeah.
Lumbering around and crushing around. It's all about the artistry of it.
Yeah, true. One thing I've also found kind of funny about like mechs and all that is like why are those mechs giving quote unquote small arms? Like it's like we're gonna build this giant machine gun for the mech. It's like put a weapons platform system on it. Yeah.
It's not, Alden. It's not that it's CGI. It's that, and this has been a real problem lately, especially with like Disney Marvel. You want to know why so much CGI sucks? It's not because CGI itself sucks. It's because those CGI teams are overworked and underpaid.
Oh, yeah.
And they will like be 90% of the way through an effect, and they'll change it on them. Oh, you can just make this change, right? But that change requires them to go back and redo everything.
Yeah.
But they don't have the same time and budget now to work with.
Yep. Good old fashioned
because so many of these studios, they don't really have a vision that they're following through on, and that they plan out in pre-production and go through. They're just kind of going through with, whatever might be popular or whatever the studio heads say they want, or this movie did this thing and it was big, so your movie needs to do that too. And
yeah, the video game industry suffered from that too, and it still suffers that to this day. The reason why there's so much crunch time in the video game industry is literally because a lot of these big video game publishers are saying, oh yeah, this particular game, we want it bigger, we want it better, and we want this and that, and we want this. Oh yeah, and by the way, we want it done in 2 years and with half the budget of it. And anyone who's in programming can tell you that's not possible.
Yeah. Well, CGI kind of got the reputation at the start because the saying is, it's faster, better, cheaper, pick two. You can have two, but the third one's going to suffer. Any two of them, but the third one's going to suffer. You want it faster and better, you got to pay more money. Yep. You want it cheaper and faster, it's not going to be better, and so on. CGI, when compared to things like animatronics and model work for spaceships, things like that, you can have like your Star Furies in Babylon 5. You just hit copy and paste, and now you've got 200 Star Furies on the screen instead of having to build 200 Star Furies or film the same one over and over again to put it in. So it did kind of get a reputation for delivering all three, but it's not really. It's just kind of its own paradigm. And now that everything has moved up to that paradigm, those same trade-offs still apply.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, I mean that's the problem with any new technology in the entertainment industry. Is that some people see it as like a catch-all, end-all when it's just a tool.
Yeah.
CGI can do a lot of stuff, but contrary to what some filmmakers believe, it's still gonna take time. It's still gonna take time.
Yeah, and that's why they're finding so many creative ways to
Hmm.
to figure out, to innovate other ways of doing things without blowing the budget or just having to hire 5,000 artists or whatever to do it. And like one of them was always Deadpool's mask, because Deadpool is wearing his mask throughout most of the movie. They would never have had the time to do Deadpool's mask as a CGI to make it expressive and everything like it is. Certainly not in the time allotted, and it would have completely blown the budget. That's where they came up with this, because what they do is he's just wearing a normal mask when they film it. When he's speaking, it's all muffled because he's behind a mask. So Ryan Reynolds goes into a sound booth to re-record his lines. And when they do that, they shoot his face, and he's giving all the same expressions that we would want Deadpool to have. And they use that as a reference to basically do a 2D morph on his mask. So that's not 3D CGI. That's more traditional, a 2D morph kind of thing. That's a lot cheaper, but it looks good.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are times when they put in the CG mask or have a full CG Deadpool or whatever, but do you watch CGY? I don't know what that is.
It's kind of like with Darth Vader and all that, and how they had to film on a sound studio. And I remember reading how David Prowse was really upset when he found out that he was being dubbed over, and he was angry. And no offense, David Prowse, but I have seen the original David Prowse Darth Vader tics, and I'm sorry, but it is true what they say. David Prowse's Darth Vader's voice, it's funny.
Yeah, there's a story. There's a story about when they were making the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and they had a guy playing Marvin, but they were going to use the same voice from the radio show and dub him over. And Dave Prowse was in an episode of Hitchhiker's Guide, and so the guy who was playing Marvin, I forget his name, met him and said, "Okay, so I'm playing Marvin, but not doing the voice. You played Darth Vader and didn't do the voice. Why weren't you the voice of Darth Vader?" And he said, Dave Prowse looked at him and said, "I have no idea."
Yeah, because if I recall correctly, David Prowse, he has the UK equivalent of a country yokel accent.
The West Country accent.
Yeah. Yeah, so
That's
when he was doing his lines,
the kind of accent you see in Doc Martin.
Yeah, so when you see the original Darth Vader audio recording with David Prowse, you hear him go, "You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor." Apparently, according to an interview, when Carrie Fisher first heard him, they actually had to take the scenes multiple times because she kept laughing at his accent, and she used to call him Darth Farmer. Yeah.
She's not one to talk. She started out the first movie with a British accent and gradually lost it.
Yeah. Well, Carrie Fisher's American, but I know she spent a lot of time in the UK too, so.
Yeah, but like pick an accent.
Yeah.
Like who was it? It was Matthew Broderick, I think, in Lady Hawk, where his British accent kind of came and went and came and went and came and went.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta be more like Christian Bale, where if I recall correctly, Christian Bale, even though he's British, he can pull off a really sick American accent, and some people actually thought he was American or Canadian, and he said the secret is that if he's playing a character, he asks, okay, what's the character's, ethnicity gonna be? And if they say, well, he's gonna be American or Canadian, he'll pick up the accent, and he has a saying that until the filming stops, he only speaks in that accent so he doesn't lose it.
That was what Hugh Laurie did playing House.
Yeah.
On every filming day, even when they were at lunch or whatever, he was still doing the American accent.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's something. Because people say, "Well, that sounds like enigmatic and all that," but from what I understand, you have to do it.
Well, a lot of it depends on the actor. Some
Yeah.
actors go extreme and just become the character and will not respond to their real name. You have to address them by the character the whole time.
Oh
you're
yeah, I've
shooting.
heard of that too. Yeah, I've heard of that too. Yeah. Yeah, imagine that. It's like, yeah, imagine if you're a famous actor, you're playing that. It's like, oh yeah, Shane Killian, we need to talk. Shane Killian? Uh, Dr. Star-Lord. Yeah. Oh yeah, hi there.
Yeah. Apparently that was Jim Carrey when he played Andy Kaufman. As soon as he got into costume, you were never talking to Jim. You were always talking to Andy, and you had to address him as Andy, or he just wouldn't respond. It was like you were talking to someone else.
Yeah.
Some actors are like that, and then some actors just turn it on and off like a switch. They say action, they're in the character. They say cut, they're right back to it. They're back to how they are normally.
I've heard that's what Frank Welker, the voice actor's like too.
Oh,
yeah, he's like, yeah, they tell him to do this really super duper outrageous voice, and he can literally do this super outrageous over the top voice, and then once you say cut, he goes back and he talks like a completely normal guy.
Someone was interviewing Billy West about that, and they were asking about doing, because like in Futurama, he's Fry, Andy Zoidberg, and the Professor, and various other characters. But like in scenes where it's like just the three of them, they were like, what, are you just talking to yourself the whole time? And he said, well, starting out, before I really got the voices down, I had to do all of Fry's parts and then go back and do all the Professor's parts and then all of Zoidberg's parts. But then after he got into it and after he knew how the characters sound, he could do it like Fry, then Zoidberg, then Fry, then the Professor, and he could just go back and forth. But he kind of had to learn. He had to really get the voices down first.
I can imagine that episode where Fry's giving Zoidberg relationship advice. That probably had to be a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay, what do you do when you see a girl you like? Ask her to mate with me. No, you tell her she's special, but she's not. I can't do the Zoidberg voice, but
yeah.
Didn't Stephen Fry? Didn't he also voice Buzz the Honeybee from Honey Nut Cheerios?
I'm not sure. He did a ton of voices.
Oh yeah.
And if there's a female voice, it's almost certainly Tress MacNeille.
Yeah.
Because she has been doing voice work since like the 80s.
I don't know. Like going back to what I said about Are
you there?
I just had a brain fart. I forgot who I was talking about, the voice actor.
We're talking about Billy West.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Frank Welker. Yeah, going back to Frank Welker, apparently there was I don't know if it's true or not, but there's an urban legend that, Frank Welker, was such a talented voice actor, they would say, I bet there's a voice you can't do. Can you do this? Can you do like this monster voice? And he did it. Can you do this voice? Can you do it? And I said,
Hey there? Hello? Oh, maybe he'll come back in a minute. Yeah, if you look at the credits of movies, every now and then you'll just see Frank Welker down there at the bottom of the credits, like as the person who did the screams or a person who did this animal voice or whatever. And they ever need something miscellaneous like that, they go to Frank Welker. It's a YouTube channel that covers the stuff when it comes to CGI. Okay, I'll check it out.
sorry about that. My mom showed up and she screamed my name.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just saying that if you look in a lot of credits, like way towards the bottom, you might see, they credit Frank Welker for a couple of screams that he did or a couple of animal voices or whatever.
Yeah.
He's just,
But apparently what I was saying earlier is that apparently they finally said, okay, here's something you definitely can't do, Frank. Can you do a giant mutant zombie gorilla lobster mutant? And reportedly Frank Welker responded, male or female?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to what you said about Marvin, I'm kind of glad that didn't happen though, because let's be real here, I love Alan Rickman as Marvin.
Oh, no, I was talking about the original, the TV series, where they used I've
heard some people don't like Alan Rickman as Marvin though, because they're like, Marvin's supposed to be a paranoid robot, not a clinically depressed robot.
No, he's always been manically depressed.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be real here. If he was if you were paranoid 24/7, you'd probably be depressed too. Yeah.
He's just got
Yeah.
this terrible pain in all the diodes down his left side.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen
Yeah.
Moore
Here's how.
did the original voice of him in the radio show, and so
Yeah.
they used him when they did the TV series.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the TV series, it is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Here, I only saw the movie, but I still think the movie's pretty fun. Yeah. Yeah. This is what I thought it would all end: freezing to death on some desolate planet far away from home with a manically depressed robot. You think you've got problems? What are you supposed to do if you are a manically depressed robot? Yeah. Yeah. I know that
I
movie took a
can't
lot of.
stand this door. Every time this door opens, it aerates this intolerable air of smugness.
Mm. Yeah, I know a lot of people say.
Tell me, Marvin, do you get on well with other robots? Hate them.
I know it deviated a lot from the original book, but I still like the film. It was pretty funny. Yeah. Yeah, it's like
Well, a lot of
it's like
people,
Mark.
a lot of people are blaming what was his name, Kerry Kilpatrick, for that. He said actually the deviations were Douglas's.
Yeah,
And
if I recall correctly.
Douglas Adams always wanted each version of Hitchhiker's Guide to be different.
Yeah, because many people fail to realize if you made it all the same, exactly like the book, you're missing the point of the book because the book is meant to be an anti-trope story.
Well, and it was a radio series originally, and they were just kind of writing it on the fly because they weren't expecting it to be like, something people would still be listened to or that would turn into this big franchise. And so Douglas was taking it as this opportunity to just do this madcap stream of consciousness thing, just running off page after page, not really knowing where he was going. Just as long as it was funny, he would go there.
And I will say this: the thing I love about Marvin the robot is like in a lot of science fiction movies, the robot always talks, intellectually and goes on and drones, whereas Marvin, he just gives really short sentences and all that. Yeah, like when they're having that emergency, it's like, Marvin, what are we supposed to do? I've been talking to the ship's computer, and it hates me.
Yeah. I do love how they defeat the Vogons in the movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the point of view gun. Yeah. Yeah, he shoots everyone. It's like, oh, I feel so depressed.
Marvin saves the day.
Yeah, it's like, Marvin, you saved the day. I know. Wretched, isn't it? I think, I also think, part of me likes to imagine that I think when Marvin shot the Vogons with the point of view gun, the reason why they stayed depressed is because it gave them the sentience to realize, holy crap, we're horrible abominations of the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made them realize they're horrible abominations of the universe, and now they don't want to live anymore.
Well, and in every single iteration, they always make it clear that the Vogons are not evil. They're bureaucrats.
Yep.
They'll do the most wonderful thing imaginable or the most horrible thing imaginable, depending on what paperwork was filled out.
Oh yeah, I know they didn't say it exactly, but Vogons would destroy their own planet if it was on the paperwork.
Yeah.
The film captured that perfectly too, because when they escape, even though the Vogons have them surrounded and they've got a clear start, the lunch bell rings and they call off the entire chase because it's their lunch hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the lunch hour. We gotta go by the schedule.
Now, the film had a lot of good stuff in it. It gets ragged on, and probably for some good reasons, but it had a lot of good stuff in it.
Yeah. What's my personal theory about the? Now, granted, this applies more to the film than the original novel, but you want to know why the computer told people the secret answer to the universe is 42? Because I think the real thing is that the computer didn't know and it just wanted them to go away.
Well, no, the computer knew. It just didn't know enough to be able to tell them what the question was. Because answers are easy, questions are tougher. And you can't find meaning to the answer unless you fully understand the question.
I will say though, the computer thing, it reminds me of another film, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. One really underappreciated funny joke that really has me laughing when I look back at it is when that one scientist discovered, I have invented a new AI computer machine that will guarantee where the next golden ticket is 100%. Well, ask it, computer, where is the golden ticket? And the response is, I can't tell you. That would be cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of people like to hate on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but I think it's a good movie.
It just deviated so much from the book, which is why Roald Dahl hated it.
Yeah, but from what I understand, Roald Dahl was kind of a prick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't like Gene Wilder. And I mean, Gene Wilder was what made the movie.
Oh yeah. Speaking of which, people, you know what the original Oompa Loompas were in the original edition of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
Well, in like an original draft, they were pygmies.
Yeah, they were African pygmies.
And
Yeah, by the way,
just thought it was so difficult. Like it was kind of tying him down too much to try and make him that, and so he made them Oompa Loompas so he can have them be whatever he wanted to be and make them behave however he wanted them to.
And so many people are like, well, Willy Wonka's using them as slave labor because he's not paying them. Yet it's well established in the movies and the books that the Oompa Loompas willingly work there because the place they came from was horrible, and they're paid in cocoa beans, which they love. They worship,
Well, their money was cocoa beans.
Yeah.
That's their monetary system.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't care. They don't care that they're not making, quote unquote real money. All they care about is they're getting their cocoa beans and they're away from those crazy creatures I can't remember the name of.
Oh yeah, the was it the Wangdoodlers or the
Yeah.
I was about to say the Vermicious Canids, but those were the ones that were on the space station in Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator.
Yeah.
It's one thing that kind of disappointed me about the remake because they had the perfect opportunity to set up for Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator for a sequel and they didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean...
The thing I really didn't like about the Johnny Depp movie is, again, when they deviate from the book, primarily the whole ridiculous backstory with his parents being dentists.
Yeah.
That was dumb. That didn't work.
Yeah.
Just, you should have stuck to the book. As long as they stuck to the book, it was good.
And I mean, many people kind of pointed out that giving Willy Wonka a backstory ironically kind of defeated a character because the whole point is that he's this enigma of a human being and no one really knows what he is. Like, the only thing people know is that out of the blue, this guy called Willy Wonka opens a chocolate factory and he makes all these strange and fascinating candies and goodies, and like everyone's like, holy crap, what are these?
Well, his life is chocolate and candy and everything else.
Yeah.
That is who he is. That is his life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, the only thing I don't like about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is, the subplot of Willy Wonka hiring a man to impersonate Slughorn to test Charlie, and all that. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand. No. Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, I understand what the message was. I just think it could have been done a little better, not have Gene Wilder just out of the blue start screaming at Charlie and all that,
Well, and that's not really in Wonka's character.
Yeah.
It's just he was going to find a bunch of kids and give the factory to whoever was least rotten. And that was Charlie. And it's just trying to do the whole setup and the manipulation and the contract and things like that.
Yeah. So in a way, Johnny Depp's, character was also out of character too. And I would point out, that's just as bad, as Gene Wilder going off and screaming at them,
Yeah, but when Charlie says, "Hey, can my family come here?" And he says, "Why, no." And I watched that for the first time. I was like, "What?"
Yeah. I mean, if I recall correctly,
he doesn't miss a beat. He was like, "Yes, of course. Bring the family. The more the merrier."
Yeah.
And his grandparents wouldn't come, so they just shoved the bed straight into the great glass elevator.
Yeah.
And just get the whole bed there.
Yeah. Yeah, some people have pointed out that some of the characters in the original books of Roald Dahl, they're not as pleasant as you think they are.
Oh no, most of them have that kind of streak to them.
Like, if I recall correctly, many people have actually said this, wasn't Grandpa Joe in the book, wasn't it heavily implied that he kind of was faking, being crippled?
Yeah, it's like that was kind of the family's thing. They were just staying in bed because they have to stay in bed and that. And then it's Charlie getting the golden ticket that finally inspires him to get out of bed. And
yeah, whereas at least Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory kind of made an effort showing that that Grandpa Joe genuinely had mobility issues and he had to struggle to get out of bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's be real, you gotta love the golden ticket scene when he finally realizes he actually can walk and there's good for hope and future and all that.
Yeah.
And one thing I do like about Willy Wonka over Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is I do like how Charlie is portrayed as like a real boy. He's not like a savant and he's a goody-goody two-shoe, He's not bad and he's not right.
Roald Dahl wrote him to be an archetype because remember, he was writing for children and he wanted Charlie to be the example for children to live up to. So it would have been completely out of character for Charlie to steal the fizzy lifting drinks and all that. Because that was the thing. Charlie was perfectly good, and that's why Charlie was able to navigate through the traps the Oompa Loompas set. The book makes it pretty clear that was the Oompa Loompas doing that on purpose. Has the chat frozen? Maybe I should refresh the chat one more time to make sure before we wrap it up, which we have to do now because it's 8 o'clock. Is that it? Let me make sure. Okay.
By the way, apparently, the scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory where Augustus Gloop falls into the chocolate river, and his mother goes, "You gotta do something," and Willy Wonka goes, "Help, police, murder." apparently, that was a parody of what happened in the original book because that's what Augustus Gloop's mother did after she saw her son fall in the river. She goes, "Help, police, murder," and like she screamed it loud. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's making fun of her. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Also, if I recall correctly, in the original book, Augustus Gloop was not German.
No, I think he was German.
Well, I don't think he was German. I think the reason they kept his origin vague.
Or maybe like German or Austrian or something like that. But he was from that part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, if I recall, I mean, in the movie, I heard the reason why they confirmed that he was from Germany is because the kid actor who played him was also German and he could barely speak English, so...
Well, and they had to land on an accent.
Yeah.
All right. Any other final things to say before we call it a stream?
No, you're already leaving? Okay.
Yeah, well, it's 8 o'clock.
Okay.
I have to go spend the evening with someone who's a lot better looking than you. Sorry about that, Chris. But the wife.
What do you mean? You can't even see me.
The wife comes first. Yeah, well.
Well, yeah, that's not much competition. It's your wife. She's supposed to look prettier than me.
Yeah.
Even if she was ugly and covered in facial hair, she still has to be prettier than me.
For all we know, she wouldn't be. Maybe that's why you don't ever come on camera. All right. Thanks again, Chris. Okay. And thanks to everyone for watching. Stay strong and be free.